It was just a note, folded 3 times, no signature, tucked inside the back of a patient's chart. Ryan thought it was some message from the medical team, maybe a routine instruction. But when he opened that piece of paper, the words made him forget the pain, the wires, even the endless beeping of the heart monitor. Those who sow with tears ... will reap with songs of joy. He didn't know who wrote it, but that day, his fever vanished. Days later, another note, underneath his food tray. Then another, sewn into a fresh pillowcase, all of them filled with verses, all of them unsigned. And every time a note appeared, something unexplainable happened in Ryan's body. A sudden improvement, a surprising test. Result, a peace he didn't remember how to feel. Who was doing this? Why? And why did it always happen on Wednesdays? In the intensive care wing, doctors spoke of resilience, of a possible miracle. But Ryan wanted a different answer. He needed to understand what was happening when no one was watching. Because sometimes, the greatest healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from silence, from someone praying for you ... Even if you don't know it, if you believe there are people like that, angels in disguise, praying in silence and touching lives without seeking recognition, write down the name of someone who needs healing in the comments. Leave a word of faith. Like this video to help spread this message, and subscribe, because maybe the next miracle starts in the next story. Ryan Ellis was not the kind of man who expected much from life. At 42, he had already learned that some pain doesn't go away with medicine, and not every prayer is answered when you want it to be. He was a simple man, a former literature teacher, retired early due to illness, divorced for 2 years, no children. When he was admitted to the hospital for a lingering case of pneumonia, he thought it would only be a few days, a week maybe. But when the second infection hit his lungs, the doctors stopped making promises. The truth is, Ryan didn't just feel sick in his body. His soul had been running a fever for months. It was like something inside him had quietly shut down. He felt like a book forgotten on a hospital shelf, unread, unopened, and unnoticed. The visits grew sparse. Old friends stopped texting. His ex-wife no longer answered the phone, and the doctors, more technical with each passing day, began to treat him like a chart. They spoke of stronger antibiotics, but with no certainty. He listened with his eyes closed, like a man watching his own sentence on a muted TV screen. Some days, he didn't even want to open his eyes, because opening his eyes meant waking up, and waking up meant remembering he was still there. One night, when the fever seemed to drip into his bones, Ryan whispered, "God, if anyone's still listening up there, ... send me something, anything." But the white ceiling didn't answer. Not even the IV drip seemed to make a sound. The next week, things got worse. The infection reached both lungs. His body began to resist the latest medication. The doctor's words shifted from improvement to resistance, then from resistance to wait and see. Wait, that's all he did. Wait for a breakthrough. Wait for sleep. Wait for the next wave of fever. But on a Wednesday, and Ryan would never forget this, something changed. He couldn't sleep. The room was dark, except for the soft blue glow of the monitor. The oxygen seemed thinner than usual. There was a different kind of silence, not the heavy silence of pain, but something lighter, as if someone else were in the room. He didn't hear footsteps, no voices, just a feeling, a presence. His heart sped up. He turned his head slowly, but saw no one. He closed his eyes again, trying to convince himself it was nothing. But then, something happened. It felt like someone was praying for him, not with words he could hear, but with something deeper. A presence that spoke directly to his chest. He couldn't explain it, but it was like a forgotten part of him had just been remembered. God, wherever you are, whoever's talking to you right now, keep going. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual, and for the first time in weeks, there was no pain in his chest. That same day, while flipping through his patient file, maybe out of boredom, maybe out of desperation, he found a small folded note among the medical reports. It was plain, simple paper, handwritten, definitely not from the hospital staff. With squinted eyes, he read, "Those who sow with tears ... will reap with songs of joy." He didn't recognize the verse, but he couldn't stop reading it. He folded the paper again and tucked it under his pillow. Instinctively, that day, his fever dropped. His heart rate stabilized. The doctor even said, "Interesting, his body's responding better today. This could be a turning point." But Ryan knew it wasn't just the medication. There was something more. He didn't know who had left that note, or how it got there, but he felt for the first time that someone was praying for him. Over the next few days, he paid closer attention to everything and noticed something peculiar. Every Wednesday, that same calm presence seemed to return. A faint silhouette in the doorway, a quiet breath near the bed, a soft lavender scent lingering in the air like someone had just left the room. Who's it? Why always on Wednesdays? Was it just feverish imagination? Or was someone really carrying his name in silent prayer? The question echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. What if it's not just medicine fighting for me? His faith, buried for years under disappointment and silence, began to flicker again. A small candle in a dark room. He started looking forward to Wednesdays, because on those days the fever would ease, a note would appear, and hope didn't feel so far away. But Ryan still didn't know who was behind the quiet intercession, and he was about to learn that what seemed like a hidden gesture might be carrying a whole miracle inside it. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. She was 56, always wore her hair the same way, kept her scrubs spotless, her gaze serene but distant. To an outsider, she was just another night shift nurse, quiet, punctual, efficient. She never raised her voice, never lingered long in the break room, rarely shared anything about her life beyond the hospital walls. But there was something no one noticed. Sarah carried a small, worn brown notebook in the right pocket of her uniform, about the size of her palm. Inside, she wrote names, phrases, verses. She prayed for every patient she cared for, as if she were caring for her own son. Because in a way, she was. His name was Caleb. He was 17 when he was admitted with a sudden heart infection. He stayed for 13 days. Sarah spent every night by his side, praying, pleading, weeping. On the 14th day, Caleb passed. She didn't blame God, but she no longer knew how to live outside that place. So she came back as a nurse. From that day on, her mission was simple: pray for every patient like she had prayed for Caleb, but never out loud, never to be seen. She prayed in silence, in hallways, through half-open doors, while straightening a blanket, holding a hand, adjusting a monitor. She wrote out prayers on small pieces of paper, chose a verse for each patient, folded it gently, and hid it in places they would eventually discover inside a pillowcase, between chart papers, under the food tray. Sarah didn't want recognition. She just wanted to be a bridge between heaven and a hospital room, between someone's despair and a miracle still possible. In that wing, the most difficult cases somehow ended up with her. It wasn't policy, it was perception. Her co-workers noticed that patients she cared for often got better. It was as if her presence carried a layer of invisible comfort, but no one asked, and she never explained. When Ryan arrived, she read his name on the chart like she did with all the others. Ryan Ellis, age 42, double pneumonia, severe condition, poor response to treatment. That night, she wrote in her notebook, Ryan, weep with him, pray for healing, ask for hope. For the first few days, she observed from a distance. She knew the look of someone who had given up inside. Ryan didn't need to say anything, his eyes spoke for him. She chose a verse, wrote it out carefully, folded it in 3, and tucked it between the medical notes. Those who sow with tears ... will reap with songs of joy. She knew he would find it, knew it would plant something ... and it did. The next Wednesday, during her shift, she was by Ryan's bed adjusting the oxygen tubing. He appeared to be asleep, but as she walked out, he opened his eyes. He smelled that familiar scent, felt the same peace. That night, she wrote another note. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But she didn't leave it just yet. She waited for the right moment. She always waited until the heart was soft enough for the word to enter like healing oil. Sarah also knew she couldn't do this forever. Hospital administration had already warned the staff about anything that could be considered religious expression. But she kept going, because for her, it wasn't religion, it was faith. Faith that someone could be touched, even if they never knew who it came from. At home, her altar was simple: a candle, a worn Bible, that brown notebook. Every night after work, she prayed over each name written that day. Ryan's name was now constant, and every Wednesday, she asked one thing: Lord, show him that you still see him, that you still hear, that you still care. What struck her most was that Ryan never recognized her as the one behind the notes. Even when she entered the room, fixed his sheets, checked his monitors, he didn't make the connection. Sarah knew how to disappear into the service, like someone who hides their pain behind a mission. But something inside her was beginning to change. With each note she wrote, each silent visit she made, something in her heart was healing too. It wasn't just for Ryan, it was for Caleb. Maybe God still lets me be a mother, in other ways, even if no one calls me that. The following Wednesday, Sarah wrote a third note, but this time she hesitated. A new nurse was watching her from the hallway. Administration had tightened protocol. She knew one wrong step could remove her from the ward. So she waited, folded the paper gently, slipped it into her pocket, and stood beside Ryan's bed, silent, still, praying. In that moment, Ryan opened his eyes. He couldn't see her clearly, but he felt it. Someone was there, someone who wasn't just tending to the body, but to what couldn't be seen. And it was in that moment that everything began to shift. It was just past midnight, one of those hours when time seems frozen inside a hospital, and the clock hands refuse to move. The air felt colder than usual, and Ryan woke up with a strange discomfort he couldn't name. It wasn't pain, it was restlessness, like something was about to happen. His eyes were heavy, so was his head, but there was something different. In the room, not a noise, a presence. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like someone was there, not physically, not walking, but there in spirit. His heart began to beat faster. He turned his head slightly. Nothing. He closed his eyes again, telling himself it was probably just another fever dream. But then, something else. It felt like a prayer, not spoken aloud, but heard deep inside his chest. A conversation he wasn't part of, but was still about him. God, whoever's praying right now, don't stop. The next morning he woke up feeling different, not just less tired, lighter, as if someone had carried his pain for a few hours so he could finally breathe. On his breakfast tray, there was an extra napkin. Underneath it, another note. This time, the handwriting was more firm, round and deliberate. And a new verse: even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Ryan swallowed hard. The words seemed written just for him, as if the person who penned them knew exactly what haunted his nights. He didn't show the note to anyone, didn't mention it. He folded it, tucked it inside the envelope with the others, and stared out the window for a long time. He thought of his father, who used to say, when you can't pray anymore, God will send someone to pray for you. He had never taken that seriously, until now. That afternoon, a small monitor malfunction led to a quick equipment swap. As they replaced the cables, Ryan noticed his pillow had been changed. Inside the new pillowcase, something else. Tiny, folded 4 times, torn at the edges, but familiar. Another note. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Ryan looked around. Who are you? He whispered, but the only reply was the soft hum of the ceiling vent. For the first time since his admission, he felt compelled to pray, but he didn't know where to begin. His lips opened slowly, like recalling an old melody. God, thank you for this person, for their courage, for the care I can't see, but feel. If you're still listening, please, keep going. That night, he slept better than he had in weeks. And again, his body responded. The fever dropped faster. His appetite returned. The test results showed subtle but undeniable improvement. The doctors began using a new word, unexpected, but Ryan knew. This wasn't surprise, this was intercession. The next day, he asked for paper and a pencil, not to write to his family, not to make notes about his recovery. He wrote what his soul was shouting. Whoever you are, thank you for not giving up on me when I had already given up on myself. He folded the paper and left it on his pillow, hoping it would find its way, but the note disappeared. No one mentioned it. No new note followed for 2 days. Silence returned, and with it, fear not of dying, but of being forgotten. Lord, please don't let this person stop. On the next Wednesday, Sarah entered the room like usual, mask on, eyes calm. She checked his monitors, adjusted his blanket, but inside, she was torn. She had seen the note Ryan left. She had kept it, but the pressure around her was growing. If anyone found out, she could lose everything. A new nurse had been transferred to the floor, and Sarah noticed the glances, felt the scrutiny. Still, she wrote another note, shorter, more intimate. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. She thought about slipping it into the pocket of Ryan's gown, but she hesitated, tucked it into her apron pocket instead, and left. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He waited for the presence, for the scent, for the whisper of prayer. Nothing came. He clutched the old notes like a rosary. He read them slowly, over and over, trying to relive the comfort. Don't stop praying for me, whoever you are, just keep going. It was a prayer without a name, but heaven still heard Dot, and somewhere beyond that sterile hospital room, something had already started to shift. The next 2 days passed with no new notes, no verses, no familiar scent. It was as if Ryan's faith was once again standing at the edge of abandonment. The envelope where he kept the previous notes had become his most treasured possession. He kept it next to his pillow like a sacred keepsake. Whenever the anxiety rose, he would unfold each message, reading them with teary eyes, not because they were magical, but because they were alive. Each handwritten word pulsed with the soul of someone who still believed on his behalf. With no new notes, Ryan began searching for clues. He watched every nurse who came in, studied gestures, expressions, scents, how long each one stayed in the room. He looked for signs, a prolonged glance, a pocket with a bulge, a lingering presence, nothing until, while inspecting the newly changed pillowcase, he had a thought. He ran his fingers along the inner seam, every stitch, and there, hidden between the lining and the filling, was something folded 4 times, tiny, discreet, but real. Another note, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." Ryan recognized it instantly. Jeremiah, the verse his father used to recite in the hospital before passing. It was like a memory long buried had been pulled back to the surface. He held the note to his chest and closed his eyes. And just like that, the tears came, not from pain, from reunion. "You're still out there, aren't you?" The next day, he tried leaving another message. He wrote on the back of a lab report, "Thank you for reminding me that God still has plans." He folded it and tucked it inside his chart folder, hoping it would be found. But later that afternoon, a different nurse entered his room, hair pulled back, crisp uniform, a serious face. "Hi, Mr. Ellis. I'm here to give you your medication. Sarah is off tonight." "Sarah?" he asked, startled. "Yes, the night nurse assigned to you. Her name." For the first time, her name, Sarah. She was the one writing the notes. She was the one who prayed on Wednesdays. It all made sense now, but along with the answer came a new fear. If Sarah was gone, who would carry the silence? That night, the room felt emptier than ever. Her absence was like a light being switched off, and for the first time in days, Ryan's fever returned. The next morning, the doctor delivered troubling news. A mild recurrence of infection had been detected in his left lung. It wasn't serious, but it needed monitoring. Did the infection come back, or had his faith started leaking out again? Sarah would later write in her notebook. At her apartment, a decision was forming in silence. Sarah had been called in by her supervisor, someone she didn't know who had reported non-clinical behavior, emotional over-involvement with patients, possible religious content left among medical materials. No proof, but a clear warning: refrain from any actions that could be misinterpreted. This is a professional environment. Sarah sat on her couch, notebook open. She flipped to Ryan's page. There it was. Still hasn't figured it out. Still fighting. Still believes. She hesitated. Thought about stopping. Thought about complying. But then her eyes landed on the candle at her altar. And she thought of Caleb. If someone had prayed more for him, maybe. She didn't finish the sentence. She just stood up, grabbed a fresh piece of paper, and wrote, "He wipes every tear from their eyes and does not ignore the broken-hearted." She folded it carefully and headed to her shift. That night, she didn't go to Ryan's room immediately. She waited. The hallway cleared. The monitor blinked steadily. Ryan was asleep. She stepped inside, checked the machines, adjusted the blanket, fixed the wires, and with a subtle gesture, she placed a note between the pages of a folded medical pamphlet on the bedside table. As she left, she smiled a sad smile, but full of peace. The next morning, Ryan found the note, and he knew. Now he had a name. Sarah. His heart wanted to say thank you, to cry out, to write something even deeper, but silence was still necessary. He folded the note with reverence, placed it in the envelope with the others, and wrote on a separate piece of paper, "I don't know if I can call you by name, but I can say this: you saved me." He left the new note between the sheets, hoping it would be found. The cycle continued. Notes, prayers, silence. But on the next shift, Sarah didn't come back. Sarah's absence stretched into more than just a night. By the second day without her, Ryan started counting the hours. By the third, he counted the beats of his own heart. By the fourth, he asked not to be disturbed. He just wanted to sleep or forget. The fever returned. His lungs began to wheeze again. The doctor's language regressed. Volatile, adverse, reaction. We need to monitor closely. But Ryan knew it wasn't just his body. It was the ache of being left behind. Because more than the notes, Sarah had carried something no one else brought into that room. Prayer. Not loud prayer. Not group prayer. Something else. It was like she knelt inwardly, behind every movement, inside every glance, between every silence. He missed that. More than any medicine, he decided to write another letter, even if she couldn't come back. If you're still out there, ... even if he can't come in. Know that every note was a miracle. Every word held me up when I wanted to give up. If I'm still breathing today, it's because someone prayed for me when I no longer could. He folded the letter, but didn't leave it on the pillow. He placed it inside the envelope with the others, as if protecting something holy. On the fifth morning, a new nurse entered. He didn't smile, checked the machines in silence, changed the bandage with cold hands. Before leaving, he muttered. The night nurse was reassigned. Their shifting schedules reassigned. The word dropped into Ryan's chest like a stone. The physical pain that followed felt small compared to the other one. She's not coming back. And right then, staring up at the ceiling, Ryan had his first respiratory crisis in weeks. Heart rate surged. Monitors screamed. Staff rushed in. Oxygen, steroids, IVs, everything according to protocol. But none of that touched the deeper wound. Who will pray for me now? That evening, the attending physician discovered something unusual. Among Ryan's older documents, inside the envelope of test results, there was a handwritten note. She read it briefly, puzzled. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. She returned it without comment. Just another verse, perhaps, but somehow, the name of God had entered the room, written by hand, folded in silence, and no one on staff had put it there. Ryan woke up late in the afternoon, weaker, quieter, but with those words spinning in his mind. He read the note again, slowly, like reciting sacred poetry. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. This time, the air moved easier through his chest, as if the verse itself had entered his bloodstream, like medicine wrapped in scripture. For the first time, Ryan felt God signing the notes. Not Sarah, not an angel, but the Lord himself. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. The revelation struck like light in a dark room. That was it. The psalm, the root of it all. Everything now pointed to that verse. Every silent prayer, every midnight tear, every note hidden in cloth or paper. It all came down to one truth. God heals what no one sees. God binds what doctors can't touch. Ryan exhaled, as if surfacing from deep water, then whispered, "Thank you for leaving this psalm just for me." What followed wasn't relief. It was calling. If I survive this, I can't keep this to myself. That night, he asked the nurse for paper and pen, not for goodbyes, not for reflection, for a plan. If I was saved by words, maybe someone else needs them too. He began writing verses from memory, short messages, simple encouragements, folded each one with care, tucked them into a folder waiting for the right time. Later that evening, a nurse entered. Not Sarah, but she paused when she saw the notes on the table. "Are these yours?" Ryan replied. "They were someone else's first, but now, I think they're mine too." She nodded, didn't fully understand, but understood enough. The next morning, a new note appeared in the room next door, and another, tucked beneath the blanket of a child in pediatrics, another, left on the nightstand of an old man who had been weeping for days. Each one carried the same verse, Psalm 147:3. None were signed. Now, pause for a moment. It doesn't matter if you're watching this from a hospital bed, a quiet room in the dark, or a place where no one else knows your pain. Close your eyes for a few seconds, take a deep breath, and listen with your heart to what Ryan once heard in silence. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. These words aren't just a Bible verse. They're a touch, a whisper from God saying, "I still see you. I still care for you. I still have plans for you." If you're hearing this story and feel it speaks directly to you, if someone you love is sick, exhausted, out of strength, if there's a pain that medicine hasn't been able to heal, I invite you now to pray with me. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be real. Don't repeat with me. If you feel led, Lord, I don't understand everything, but I believe. Heal the wounded heart right now. Calm the weary mind, and touch this body with your unseen presence. Let your word be my medicine today. Psalm 147:3. Heal me in the place no one else can reach. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this prayer touched you, write the name of someone you want to see healed in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs hope right now. And subscribe, because maybe the next miracle starts with the next story. The morning of Ryan's discharge came quietly, like it didn't want to draw attention. No balloons, no visitors, no celebration, just silence and one question. Now what? He packed his few belongings slowly. His bag was light, the envelope of notes tucked safely at the bottom. His body felt stronger, but it was his spirit that had truly changed. He walked toward the front desk, signed his release papers, took one last look at the hallway where he had almost lost everything, or maybe where he had found it. Outside, the morning sun warmed his shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, he felt he was walking out with a mission. He just didn't know yet how to carry it. In the first days outside the hospital, Ryan faced something people rarely talk about: the silence after the miracle. Those who visited while he was sick vanished. The routine was strangely quiet. His phone barely rang, and the faith that had burned so brightly in room 304 now felt like a distant echo. He felt guilty for not sensing God as strongly as before. He missed the fragility, because somehow, in the suffering, God had felt closer. Was all of that real, or just fever dreams and verses floating through my mind? That's when he decided to do something. He took out the old notes, still carefully folded, laid them out across the table, and began copying them, each one in his own handwriting. No rush, no perfection. He rewrote the verses, one by one. But this time, he signed them with love, from someone who once needed this word too. He folded the first 5, slipped them into his pocket, and went for a walk. He stopped by the pharmacy near the hospital, sat on the bench in the waiting area, and watched an older woman came in, her eyes red. Her son sat next to her, coughing quietly. Ryan stood, offered her his seat, and before leaving, placed a folded note on the chair. He heals the broken-hearted. He didn't look back. That day, he left 4 more notes scattered across the city, one on a subway bench, one tucked inside a library book, another in a donation bin, and the last at the door of the hospital chapel. Hill went home with his heart lighter, not because he had done something big, but because he finally understood. A mission doesn't need a stage, only consistency. In the days that followed, Ryan created a rhythm: morning, prayer; afternoon, walking; evening, new notes. He never knew who found them, never would. But one night, while walking past the reception desk of another hospital, he saw a handwritten message taped to the glass dot. It read, "To the one who left the Psalm 147 note, thank you. You stopped me from giving up." Ryan stood still for a moment, didn't say a word, just placed a hand over his heart, and cried, not from sadness, but from confirmation. The word didn't return empty. A week later, an envelope arrived, no return address. Inside was a single folded note: Psalm 147:3. I read it. Now I'm writing to others too. Thank you for showing me that healing multiplies. Ryan didn't know who had sent it, had never seen them, but they had understood. The word wasn't meant to be kept. It was meant to be passed on. He grabbed fresh paper, wrote simply, "Don't stop. You're someone's answer to them." And he smiled. The mission was no longer his alone. It belonged to the world, to the broken, to God. Ryan was no longer in the critical care unit. He had been moved to a smaller room, fewer wires, fewer machines, and, surprisingly, more silence than before. But a different kind of silence, not the one that smothers, the kind that lets you finally hear what's inside. He walked the hallways with slow but steady steps. Doctors referred to him as a curious case. He just smiled. Some miracles don't fit on charts. During that time, he kept writing short notes with verses. Some he left tucked inside magazines in the waiting room. Others he handed discreetly to patients who seemed lost in their own sadness, and others he simply placed and walked away, like Sarah once did. But he hadn't heard anything about her. Nothing. Until one morning, an envelope appeared on his bedside table. No return address, just his name written in that same familiar handwriting. That handwriting he would recognize even with his eyes closed. Inside was a note, and a copy of the verse he now knew by heart. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. But this time, on the back of the paper, something new. Keep going. Now it's your turn. Ryan pressed the note to his chest, closed his eyes, and for the first time he cried. Not from pain, but from purpose. At discharge, he declined celebration or balloons. He asked for just one thing, to return to the ward he came from. He walked in quietly. The bed he had occupied was now empty, the pillow freshly made. Morning sunlight spilled through the window like a quiet blessing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded paper, and slipped it into the new patient's chart. He heals the broken-hearted. No name, no explanation. And then he walked away. Months later, he began visiting other hospitals as a volunteer. He brought no titles, sometimes no words, but always a note, left in silence, each with the same psalm. People started calling him the verse man. No one ever knew his name or where he came from. Only that after he passed through, something changed. At one hospital, a newly hired nurse mentioned to a colleague, "Looks like someone is doing what Sarah used to do." Sarah, yeah, she was quiet, soft-spoken, but she prayed for every patient. The colleague looked at her, unsure how to respond. She smiled and simply said, "Maybe." She never stopped. In a letter she never sent, Sarah once wrote, "Prayer is like the wind. You don't see where it comes from or where it goes, but it always reaches where pain lives." And in a journal he never published, Ryan would later write, "If a note can carry a miracle, may I never stop writing them." Years down the road, at that same hospital, a young man was admitted after a car accident, scared, alone, far from his family. He found a small folded piece of paper inside his pillowcase. He read it softly. "He heals the broken-hearted." Tears fell. A smile followed, and he looked at the ceiling. "God, if you're still writing notes, please write mine to." And at that very moment, somewhere in the city, Ryan felt it in his spirit. There was still time for one more, because when healing comes through intercession, when the hands that touch you are unseen, when the prayer is left in silence, heaven leans in to listen. You may never see who prayed for you. You may never learn their name or recognize their face, but there's always a note waiting for you at the right time, hidden between the pages of your pain, folded inside the silence, written with words God prepared, just for your weary heart. All you have to do is open it.